So, my name is Vic Bishop. I'm the chair of the Eastside Transportation Association, and I'm here to welcome you to our Eastside Transportation Issues Briefing. We're going to have a moderator for this process. Scott Lampe is the board member of ETA and our treasurer. But before we do that, I want for the non-candidates in the room to identify themselves so that you have an idea of who you're speaking to. That's it. And the rest of you are candidates, and we're going to put your name up on the list, and we're not going to spend a lot of time that. Scott Lampe, who is going to be our moderator. Scott is a member of the City of Bellevue Transportation Commission, past chair of that, and he is currently serving on the Sound Transit Citizens Oversight Committee as a member of that board for Sound Transit, and he's going to be our moderator for this one. Thank you, Scott. Please welcome Scott.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Vic. And we look forward this morning to presenting a lot of information on policies and other transportation information that you'll find useful. Just so you know how this will run this morning, we have 5 presenters that will total about an hour for their presentation. After that, we'll have 30 minutes for Q&A. The Q&A will be only from the candidates. We are videotaping the presentations, but the Q&A will not be videotaped, just so you know. And so with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started so that we can stay on schedule. Let me get these so I can help myself. Our first presenter this morning is Maria Frost, who is the director of the Cole Center for Transportation at Washington Policy Center and is a current board member of the Eastside Transportation Association. Maria was born in Russia. She and her family came to the United States in 1993, and she grew up in Washington State. She spent 10 years working in the private sector and as a staff member at the U.S. House of Representatives and the Washington State Senate, dealing with a variety of policy issues. Please welcome Maria Frost.
From the Washington Policy Center. The Washington Policy Center is a nonpartisan independent think tank. We have 8 research legs that include education, environment, healthcare, and a number of other issues. I cover transportation. In our brief time together, that's the wrong slide. Okay. In our brief time together, I'm going to talk to you about Washington Policy Center's 5 principles of responsible transportation policy, and these are free market principles that serve as a lens through which we evaluate transportation policy in our state. And so I hope that they will be helpful to you. So the 5 principles are: number 1, tie spending to performance measures like traffic congestion relief. Number 2, respect people's freedom of mobility, deploy resources based on market demand, improve freight mobility, and utilize public-private partnerships. I will be speaking briefly about the first 3, and if you can hold your questions to the end, I'll be available after the presentation. So the first principle is tie spending to performance measures like traffic congestion relief. Traffic relief is the most basic goal of any transportation policy, and based in part on Washington Policy Center's long-standing recommendation, it became a priority in Washington State in 2018. Still, policymakers are focused on moving people rather than improving traffic flows, getting us to where we want to be faster. This means spending shifts from alleviating congestion to providing alternatives to congestion, and we think this is more expensive, less efficient, and will always lead to greater traffic congestion. Going back a little bit, in 2000, we did have specific benchmarks that were outlined by the Washington State Blue Ribbon Commission, including traffic congestion on urban state highways being significantly reduced and no worse than the national mean, as well as delay per driver significantly reduced and no worse than the national mean. And 7 years later, in 2007, lawmakers passed Senate Bill 5412, which repealed those benchmarks and replaced them with broad, watered-down policy goals. And those policy goals are listed up here on the PowerPoint: preservation, safety, environment, stewardship, economic vitality, and mobility. And as I said, in 2015, lawmakers did change that goal of mobility to include traffic congestion relief, but they decided not to include the performance-based benchmarks that I had mentioned from the commission that had been there before. And so we still have a fairly severed tie between congestion relief and transportation spending. And you see a picture there that I took of the 63rd gray notebook from DOT, where you see the policy goals listed: safety, preservation, mobility. But under mobility and congestion relief, if you look at the actual goal, there is no goal. It says NA. We think that's a problem. In a performance audit report in 2007, I thought this was interesting and I wanted to share it with you. The state auditor commented on how the Puget Sound region is not focused on cost-effective congestion reduction. He noted a 2005 article in The Economist that said that Seattle had the worst transportation planning in America. The article also noted that the political culture in the region has allowed for questionable multimodal proposals that are not consistent with historic and forecast modal usage. The auditor went on to say that these proposals are disproportionate with the present shares of travel by mode, and that any reasonable forecast of future expected shares obtainable by these modes. So this type of transportation spending is what happens when there are no performance measures or real accountability for reducing traffic congestion. We think that if lawmakers prioritized congestion relief, we could reduce congestion by 15 to 20%, which would have the double effect of reducing emissions and saving travelers millions of dollars in travel time and vehicle operating costs annually. This would also enable decision makers like yourselves to operate outside of political agendas and influential constituencies. Second principle is to respect people's freedom of mobility. We think one of the strongest motivators of human behavior is our rational self-interest, meaning we will act according to what is best for our own lives. And this is why it's largely ineffective when public officials use traffic congestion as an enforcement tool to coerce us into a particular behavior. Some policymakers continue to implement artificial policies, like urban growth boundaries and strict zoning laws, to increase population in the urban core, drive people into alternative modes of travel, and manage demand instead of respecting people's freedom to live and travel how they please. We believe that policymakers should listen to their constituents rather than impose their own ideology when in office. If constituents want congestion relief in their daily commutes to improve work, policymakers should work strategically expand capacity where it's needed, look for innovative ways to improve and maximize the capacity that we already have. And this is better than spending billions to reduce capacity, which is what is happening in our region, as you've seen on the Alaskan Way Viaduct and on 520. Another example of what this doesn't look like is the passage of House Bill 2815 in 2008, which implemented vehicle miles traveled reduction targets to force drivers out of cars and into public agency-operated modes of transportation. The targets included a vehicle miles traveled reduction of 50% below 1990 levels by the year 2050. The Department of Ecology would like to see that 50% be 80% reduction in per capita vehicle miles traveled by 2050. This is a clear example of government not respecting our freedom to choose what is best for us. Interestingly, I think this policy conflicts with other VMT reducing policies like a potential mileage tax or road usage charge, as it's being called. If greater revenue is in fact needed for roads, advancing both a tax per mile system that relies on driving while mandating reductions in driving, as this policy does, is contradictory and would naturally result in less revenue collected. So these are a couple tweets from DOT. The one on the left says, traffic continues to be absurdly bad as we pass 9 a.m. If you can do anything but drive today, it'd be a good idea. On the right, traveling south from Everett, your best bet is to go back to bed. Can't do that? Start walking. 130 minutes, Everett to Seattle.
Crack wise, but they can't solve the problems.
So our recommended approach is to respect how the public wants to live and travel. And so rather than managing traffic or using traffic jams as a tool to encourage alternative modes of travel. I know that those tweets were kind of tongue-in-cheek. They're intended to be kind of a laugh at our dire situation, but I don't think most commuters find it very funny. The last principle I'm going to talk to you about is 3, deploy resources based on market demand. So in transportation, there must be a willingness to use a service before dollars are spent to create it. In other words, we should spend transportation dollars on existing market demand. So for example, Boeing executives don't make 300 airplanes knowing that they're only going to sell 100. Similarly, governments should not spend an enormous amount of taxes in a low-demand sector where the use of that service does not justify the spending. Operating in the opposite way, the build it and they will come approach results in wasteful spending and creates a huge gap between public cost and public benefit. According to the Federal Highway Administration, private passenger vehicles represent about 85% of all forms of transportation in the Seattle region, which means that all other modes, including transit, walking, biking, telecommuting, serve 15% of travelers. So adopting a policy that disproportionately ties spending to only 15% of the market will always lead to greater congestion because the system that supports the remaining 15% is left to languish. So this is exactly what's happening in the Puget Sound region, where we have the Puget Sound Regional Council in their recent updated Transportation 2040. They have expressed they would like to see 53% of revenues going toward local and to Sound Transit and 17% of revenues going toward highways. And of that, 70% of all of those revenues would be generated, as the Puget Sound Regional Council assumes, from the road usage charge or mileage tax, as I mentioned before. If a road usage charge is implemented, the PSRC notes that they would like a, quote, broader consideration of use, meaning they would like it to not be protected by the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment protects state fuel taxes collected from drivers for highway purposes only. The protection is also extended to weight fees and other taxes intended for highway purposes. Taxes that are not protected by the 18th Amendment include multimodal account funds, tolls not placed into the motor vehicle fund, sales taxes, the motor vehicle excise tax, and property tax. Without 18th Amendment protection, the road usage charge would be another tax that drivers pay that's then diverted from where it's needed most, which is highways. And I'll conclude with this slide where this was from an article posted by the Seattle Times editorial board not too long ago when we had the tanker crash that caused a massive backup in the region. And here you can see that even the Times recognizes that it's very important that our policy be guided by total capacity and market demand. That's the last quote on the bottom. And with that, I'm done. We at the Washington Policy Center want to be a resource to you. Please don't ever hesitate to contact us. In addition to these 5 principles, we also have an in-depth policy guide where we cover all of our transportation top policy recommendations for transportation. So thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be available at the end.
Thank you very much, Maria. Our next presenter today is Vic Bishop, who's the chair of ETA. Vic is a professional engineer in Washington and served as a traffic engineer for 40 years in the Puget Sound region. After receiving his Master of Science in Civil Engineering from the UW, Vic has, quote, played in traffic for over a half century. There are over 250 intersections in the region with Vic's name associated with the traffic signal that is or has been in operation, most likely at least one in your legislative district. Since his retirement in 2007, Vic has been active in the transportation policy arena. He currently serves as an appointed member of the Bellevue Transportation Commission, recently serving as chair of the commission. He lives in Bellevue and now counts a third generation with graduates from UW. Vic's talk this morning is on mode split and revenues. He will provide you with a look at the existing and projected travel data provided by public agencies. He will put into perspective the revenue streams from various tax and other sources in relation to how we travel in this region. Please welcome Vic Bishop.
Well, thank you, Scott. So the timer, I got 3 more minutes because we got to go back and do what I promised to do in the first place. And here's a list of those of you candidates who RSVP'd and said that you would be here, including Mark Seymour, Chad Magendas, Paul Graves, who is not here. He said private stuff got in the way this morning. Eli Ty, Doug Rolston, Jeremy Fitch, Monica Dingra, Dale Blanc, Amber Krabak, is she here? James Dillon, Lindsay Shumway, Vandana Slata, and Amy Wallen. And several others have come in.
No.
And I want to acknowledge that I know that Michael Appleby from the 41st is here, Mark Harmsworth from the 44th is here.
My name's Debbie Blodgett. I'm with the 1st Legislative District, and I did RSVP.
You did RSVP, and I didn't get you on the list. I am sorry, I apologize. And
Nathan Diley, I'm running in the 41st. I did RSVP also, and I'm here.
okay, well, so much for my credibility. So, let's see.
I think there's another thing.
Is there somebody else? Okay, yes.
Michael Curtis, 45th position.
Michael Curtis, and you're not on there, and you did not RSVP, I don't think. All right. One more slide. Okay, so I wanted to actually tee this up pretty good by saying that you candidates should be fortunate and successful in your endeavors this fall. Are going to have some serious transportation issues to deal with at the legislature this year in 2019. They include the 405, 167 financing and tolling issues, the extending of express toll lanes to Renton is under design and going to be under construction in 2019, but the legislature has not made the authority to toll that segment. That is going to be on your plate in 2019. Bonding the revenue from tolls on express toll lanes is going to be on your plate this year. And that's a huge issue in terms of the future of how we're going to build out the 405 master plan. Extending the SR 167 hot lanes has been in operation for 5 years as a pilot program. That has never come off of a pilot program. You are going to be asked to make that permanent, change the rules to make it look like the ETLs on 405, because you can't have a continuous system that isn't consistent with each other. So you're going to be asked to change the rules on 167, make it permanent, and that sort of stuff. Sound Transit's going to be on the table. The car tab thing is not going to go away. The governance of the board is not going to go away, and you're probably going to have some funding alternatives, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So, now I'm back to my mode split and revenue discussion. Traffic congestion is real. You hear it every day when you're doorbelling from your neighbors. We all know it, and I just wanted to put up some slides that the PSRC, our regional planning agency who keeps all the data on such things, they know it too. 25% increase in 1 year of the delay on the total freeway system in the region. And that's SR3 in Kitsap County, I-5, 16, 90, 167, 405, and 520. Add those all together, in 1 year, 25% increase in delay. That's real. It's not something that we just need to think about. That's something that is how do I do this? There we go. The City of Bellevue does a annual survey for the budget purposes in January. This year, they did it for this upcoming budget. They have asked an open question of their, in a scientific survey, what is the most important issue in the City of Bellevue? By a ratio of 44% to the next highest one, which is available housing priority at 15%. It's a 3-to-1 margin that traffic is the single most important issue for the residents of the City of Bellevue. Now, most of you don't have the City of Bellevue in your district, but you do have similar cities and residential communities that have similar kind of residents. This is a survey that really says traffic is on the minds of folks. One of the issues that is constantly brought up is that, oh, we're going to change how people move. And we're going to change it by encouraging people to use transit. Well, first of all, you have to understand that predominant by 3 to 75% of transit riders are commuters, people that go from home to work. That's historical, that hasn't changed, that's always the case. 3/4 of the people that use transit go home, from home to work. The national data from 1969 to 2013 in urban areas says that the commute share of how people get to work is the blue bar. And that's 85 to 90% of the home to work trips. And that needle has not changed. It's been flat, 85 to 90% for 44 years. On the other hand, back in 1969 in the national data, the red bar was sitting there at 9% of the commuters took transit to and from work. When you get out here in 2013, 44 years later, it's 6%. Transit ridership as a percent of the trips that are being made in any region is going down, and that includes this region. When you look at the 10% nationally, Seattle was at 6% back here. Back in the early 60s, when I was going to graduate school, we were trotting out how we got 6% of the people in transit, and we're going to grow that to 10%. What's happened in the 44 years? It's down to 3.4%. As a percentage of the trips that are made in the region. Transit as a solution to this transportation issue has failed for 44 years. And the question we have, are we going to be able to change that trend? And constantly it's, well, sure we're going to do it. So PSRC, Puget Sound Regional Council, is our regional transportation planning agency, and they have prepared a plan for 2040. And their plan has 18 months worth of highly technical people working the problem, trying to figure it out, and what's going to happen between now and 2040. And this is the results in terms of how they believe people are going to actually move in 2040. And the blue represents people in the region on a daily basis. In the region is 4 counties, including Kitsap County. And blue is in cars, 84%. And walking and bicycles is this part. And this is the transit part. The green is the transit part. And the dark green is light rail. The light green is buses. And what this tells you is that if you think in transit, buses is the dominant, by far, the transit systems. Light rail is tiny, 1/4, this is 0.4%. This little number right there, 0.4%, that's this bar right there. Commuter rail doesn't even rank a bar. You can't even see the pie slice on it, 0.1%. 4.3% is what that adds up as transit. And that's the point of this stuff. Same thing in Bellevue. Bellevue did a transit master plan. We spent 3 years on the commission figuring out what kind of transit system we want to have. We went from 2010 to 2030. This is the green is people in cars, the black on this one is walking, and the blue is buses. This is where we were in 2010. This is how we project it's going to be in 2030. And the point of this is we're going to grow 500,000 trips, and by far the majority of the growth they're going to be in cars, even though we're going to double and triple the transit, which we won't, but that's what the plan says. So, but it doesn't matter what the plan says. The dominant thing is that most of the new trips are going to be in cars, and we cannot ignore that. This is a chart that we put together at ETA in 2012 based on what was going on then. And the beauty of this chart is that it compares the 88% in green is to how people actually move, and the red percent in red is 40% is the money we spent. So focusing on that, we get to say that 88% of car travelers only get 40% of the revenue. So the vast majority of your constituents who are going to vote for you are riding on the road, and you're only getting half of the public money. And that was in 2012. That was before SD3, and before Seattle's Prop 1, and before Connect Washington, which changes those percentages so it's 70-30 instead of 60-40 in today's current law. So it's demonstrating the dramatic disproportionality of how we're spending our money. This chart shows King County and how it's grown over 24 years. Back in 1991 over here, the blue is the streets and highways funding for King County, including WSDOT cities and all the stuff that we put into roads in King County. The red is Metro, King County Metro, and the green is Sound Transit. So you can see how in the 24 years, how the growth in the revenue towards the transit has been dramatic. And we've switched the ratio from 63% to roads to 37% transit, flipped it on its head. 39% roads and 61% transit. And this is 2015, and this does not include SD3. When you add SD3, that goes to 70-30, excuse me. So, that's the end of my story.
Thank you for that passionate speech. We appreciate that. Our next presenter is David Hablewitz. You may know David for his activism and his unprecedented success as reported by the Stop 405 Tolls petition website in gathering over 32,000 signatures in less than 3 months to eliminate toll lanes. David also has been a dedicated bike commuter for 18 years and has been a member of the Sierra Club for 26 years. He's been featured in local publications for his involvement in commute trip reduction. And recently, he has joined the community van pilot program sponsored by Metro King County. David has dedicated thousands of hours observing, researching, analyzing, interviewing other experts, and publishing and speaking on transportation topics, including toll lanes, which he will be discussing with us today. Please welcome David Hablewitz.
multi-hand task here. That works. That's where it began. 1 hour flying at the Beardsley overpass on a Friday morning from 7 to 8 a.m. generated 32,000 signatures. That was what started it. A little bit of, so I got my slides a little backwards here. Yeah, this is what we got from that. A lot of people, and know that we quit looking for more signatures. We didn't promote it after those 3 months, or we would probably be well over the number we have. Another point to make is, I use moveon.org, and if you are conservative, there are a lot of people who absolutely refuse to sign the petition simply because I use that website. For that, eventually we did actually post a thing where they could send in a paper, and I got several thousand more signatures on paper. Uninitiated. I didn't print them out and solicit them in front of any restaurants or grocery stores or anything like that. That was totally through social media. A few of the things that we've accomplished with Stop 405 tolls, and I'm not going to read my slides to you, you have them, so I'll just highlight a few things. One is that we got them to take the tolls off at night and on weekends. An interesting thing, there were tolls, there was congestion at 9 p.m. on a random Thursday night. When they turned off the tolls, that all went away. So, an important point. Another thing that's not on here is the hard shoulder running, and that was something that I brought up to Patty Rustello. She made a note, and they came back with that. So, we have been making a difference. And one of the things I like to point out is activism, and this is my saying, activism is the fourth branch of government. Hopefully that together we can keep that train going in the right direction, or that ship going where we expect it. So some of the topics we'll talk about. First, what is the purpose of what we're calling express toll lanes or HOT lanes? Understand that the intent, and this is published by by the FHWA and understood by transportation engineers, that the purpose of a HOT lane is to take a HOV lane and sell off the surplus capacity. That's all it does. It sells off the surplus capacity. We're trying to use it to manage congestion and perhaps do some social engineering and use it as a revenue source, which I'll come back to on that one. So how can you get an improvement in congestion? There's 3 ways. This is a triangle. You've seen these types of things before. You can increase capacity, so adding a lane. You can reduce demand, carpooling, work from home. You can improve efficiency. Direct access ramps are an example. You can also change your definition of congestion, and that's one of the things that we've chosen to do. One of those is that we're ignoring the fact that the 45 mile per hour speed limit is a requirement by the federal guidelines. So how does this actually happen? Are we really looking at reducing congestion or managing it? And the term that we're using, that is being used in the legislature, is congestion management. And of course, what they're really saying is we're pushing them out of one lane and pushing them into the others, and then we just pay attention to the one lane. Unfortunately, there are groups like, and I love this, I went and I visited I told you I talked to a lot of people, Washington Trucking Associations. This is from them. If you bought it, it was delivered by a truck. And that is so true. They don't have the option to use the toll lanes. So consider that it costs them $150 per hour to operate these big rigs, some even more. They don't have this choice. So you're not hearing a lot from them because they're too busy being on the road, or else they would be more involved in this. What are the criteria for success? And this is based on the bill that was passed. So the law says there are 2 requirements that it must meet. One is that the HOT lane, must operate at least 45 miles per hour for 90% of the time. This is the requirement that is mirrored in the federal requirements. As a toll lane, the moment they allow SOVs, solo drivers, into that lane, they must guarantee they protect the carpools. to do that, they say that you can let those solo drivers in as long as it doesn't negatively impact the carpool's performance. Unfortunately, that's not what we have. The second thing in our requirement was that they operate not at a deficit, but they at least break even. We know where that went. Some of the criteria that are not put in for success, and you can look through that, but one that really stands out to me is customer satisfaction. The people are the primary stakeholder of this system, and they are the one group that has been ignored and left out of all of their analysis. Here's a letter, and thank you, Bob, for providing this. This is from WSDOT to the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, which is commenting on, yes, sorry, we have gone 3 years, we're almost at 3 years, of failing to comply with the federal regulation. Yes. And let me also say that they neglect to mention that when they say the toll lanes are working, that it's actually due to the capacity increase that we're seeing any improvements, not because they're charging money. A little bit on the safety or the complexity of the toll lanes. This is cool. You gotta make sure that you have the slides in the same order.
There's a toll for putting your slides.
There probably is. There probably is. So I'll speak to what you see, and that is, they created a whole bunch of YouTube videos. They even got one wrong. I pointed this out. They took it down. They created a mobile app for drivers to use to see. He's chuckling. Where's this going? They took it down when I pointed out you really don't want drivers looking at the toll prices while they're going to decide if they're going to get in toll lanes or not.
Yeah.
Safety. This isn't a number. This isn't about numbers. This is about people. Accidents, the collision rate went up 55% when they implemented the tolls. This is standard. They know this nationwide. This is what happens. In fact, in Miami, some of the deadliest toll lanes that they have in the country. Last year, their legislator attempted to remove toll lanes altogether because of the fatalities that we've had. Now, we've only had one fatality that I'm aware of, but this is something you have to consider that, and one of the primary reasons, I'm actually writing a paper on this, but one of the primary reasons that there is this disparity is because, or the accident increase is because of the differential in speeds. And the faster we make those toll lanes compared to the general purpose lanes, the greater the danger, the more frequent, and the more severe those accidents are. This is in direct opposition to Vision Zero, and as legislators, that is a primary goal that they've set, is Vision Zero, no deaths. Well, we're going the wrong way with these, and it doesn't matter how much money. I mean, how much money are you willing to make to justify killing people? There are a few other things that we have here that are barriers, let's do this. How much does it cost to drive in the toll lanes for free? $45. Why? You have to first open an account and put $30 of your money into their pocket. Then you have to buy a pass, a flex pass for $15. Okay, now if you get 2 more people to ride with you, you can use them for free. That's a problem, and that is a huge barrier to actually using these the way we intended them to be used. A lot of people absolutely refuse to put their credit card information in there. They're not going to do that. So what's happened with our carpools? Where did our carpools go? Before we had HOT lanes, 90% of the cars in that lane were 2-person carpools, our most effective way for reducing congestion. Today, 85% of those vehicles, and these are not just my numbers, these are WSDOT's numbers, 85% of the vehicles are solo drivers. How are we reducing congestion? How are we reducing vehicle miles traveled? How are we reducing people from being in their cars? We're not. Now here's a little graphic I like to show because they'll say, well, we're getting so many more cars through. And you can look at the number, it comes down to, for the number of cars that are going through per hour, times the number of people in the car. Pretty simple. The math works out to 850 fewer people per hour, not cars, people. They would have to double the number of people coming through there in order to meet the same number of people getting through. More on the, oh, that one jumped in the front. Thank you, Bob. This is what we're going to. This is the future. The WSDOT just announced that they are going to be tolling all of the HOV lanes from Marysville to Puyallup. And I might have that might even go further. But all of the HOV lanes, the express lanes as well on I-5. So if you think 31,000 signatures is a lot, watch what happens when this happens. There isn't any capacity add that I am aware of for this. This is you're going to convert them from one style to another. We're going to get rid of all of our carpools and turn them into paid drivers. And something to consider, because I heard a legislator say that, but you have a choice. This is not a regressive tax. Well, it is a regressive, but at least you have a choice. You don't have to use the toll lanes. That is a false choice. Understand that today, most of us can afford 75 cents. Not so many of us can afford $10, but they've set a cap. The study that came back said we have to go to at least $17 if we're going to have them free-flowing at that 45 mile per hour minimum. What will it be in the year 2040? Are you going to be able to afford a $40 or $50 toll? I ask this question not hypothetically. Washington, D.C., they implemented toll lanes, and within the first 6 months, they saw toll prices, unlimited, $44. This is what we're looking at. The point is, congestion pricing is unsustainable. We need to look for methods that actually reduce our use of the roads, and tolling is not the one. I ran over, and being the timer, shame on me, but they all spoke, and they were 2 minutes short, so I don't feel so guilty. Back to you.
Thank you very much, David. Our next presenter is Bob Pishu. Bob is the Transportation Director of Kemper Development Company and Chair elect of the ETA. Bob studies local, state, and federal transportation issues to reduce congestion and improve mobility across the Puget Sound region. Prior to that, he was senior economist at Henricks, a global traffic data company, and was previously the transportation director at Washington Policy Center, a free market think tank based in Seattle. Please welcome Bob Pishu.
Try to switch these mics so I don't have to hold it. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Much easier. Okay, so today I'm going to briefly go over the I-405 master plan, as well as kind of highlight some of the kind of where we're at and what we're seeing on the roadway, as well as what's next, what's upcoming. So for some background, for many years and many millions of dollars, a bunch of jurisdictions and stakeholders and people in the community got together and they said, we want a plan that works. We want a plan that accommodates the growth in trips that we see coming over the next couple of decades. So this plan was to accommodate a 50% increase in trips between 2000 and 2020. And so what this does, the whole plan went to the feds, they approved it. And as you can see, I've listed a couple of letters from Bellevue and Kirkland, which says, yeah, we support it. We support additional capacity on 405, essentially. So as I said, it was designed to solve the problem. So as you can see here, there are a bunch of aspects to this. It's multimodal. It largely relies on an increase in capacity, but also park and rides, van pools, BRT, etc., direct access ramps that David mentioned earlier. And so it was a huge combination of things. They took 4 alternatives and took the best of each one of those and came up with what is now the adopted plan. And as you can see here, this was from the environmental impact statement. As you can see here, most of the money was supposed to go to capacity improvements, essentially, what I mentioned before, but also, a hefty chunk to BRT and things like that. So kind of here's how it's been implemented. So back in 2003 and 2005, we saw a couple of gas tax increases, 5 cents and 9.5 cents. as well as the most recent Connecting Washington package. They all put money into 405, and even in after the TPA, the 9.5-cent gas tax increase in 2005, there was actually a referendum that went to the voters, and the voters actually rejected that referendum, keeping the 9.5-cent gas tax in place. That's not tough, but that's not easy. But they saw that the benefits on roads like 405 were important enough to keep an increase in the gas tax. Just noted that there was also another ballot measure that would have put funds into 405, the RTID, but that was rejected. And so the first improvements were between Bellevue and Linwood. So you may recognize some of these, like the Northeast 6 direct access ramps, the 128th direct access interchange, as well as the toll lanes. Now, those were originally fully funded by gas tax revenues, promised to the public as general purpose lanes. But the legislature passed House Bill 1382, which in 2011 converted those future general purpose lanes into the lanes that you see today. As was mentioned earlier, the Tukwila to Bellevue segment is now, there is now an environmental assessment that's out for comment, but that's a $1.2 billion project, of which about $1 billion of it is through gas taxes and $215 million is unspecified / tolls. And basically it would extend the toll lanes to complete the 40-mile system from 167 all the way up to Linwood. So with kind of how we got to where we are today, in a recent Seattle Times article, it was stated that toll lanes often carry 35% more cars per hour than general lanes. And so TDA looked at it, Bill Eager, analyzed the WSDOT ramp and roadway reports, both for 2014, so prior to the lanes opening, to 2016, which is the latest available, so after tolling began. And what we found here, and I'll point it out, but it should be in your slides. Oh, now I get why the movable mic is good. But on the bottom right, you'll see that in the peak hour, in the peak direction in the morning, the toll lanes carry about 12% more vehicles per hour per lane than the express toll lanes. And this is sorry, let me back up. This is an average of the 15 points at which WSDOT measures essentially vehicle flows along the 405 corridor. So this is an average of those 15. It's not comparing one point to another. It's comparing the entire roadway to the entire roadway previously. And as you can see, also in the PM direction, it's about 8% more per hour, per peak hour, per lane in the general purpose lanes than the toll lanes. For all day, so not just looking at the peak, for all day, the general purpose lanes carried more than twice the ETL volume per lane. It should be noted also that at certain points, if you do compare 2014 to 2016, compare GP to express toll lanes, there are certain points along the roadway that the ETL per hour per lane are outperforming the general purpose lanes. And we found that, for example, in the AM peak, that happened on 4 of the 15 points. The other 11, the general purpose lanes, outperformed the express toll lanes, for example. We also took a look at, or Bill also took a look at 167. And of those screen lines that were analyzed, in every single one, the general purpose lanes outperformed the hot lanes on 167 during the peak AM and peak PM periods, as you can see here in the blue. So where are we at? So obviously the 2020 deadline is 2 years from now. The master plan is big, it's ambitious, it's bold, but it's a real plan, and we're not going to meet that 2020 deadline. I picked out 2 of the progress reports because I just want to focus on them, but you know, the BRT system is largely there. There's probably more that needs to get done. There are other things that also need to get done, but I wanted to at least get the big capacity things on there. And this is all on WSDOT's website. You can go look at the percentage that are completion, progress report. But I just want to highlight, I mean, there's an additional lane in each direction that's unfunded, general purpose. I mean, there are 6 major freeway to freeway connections that are unfunded. One of those, the SR 167 interchange, is partially funded. Those are just direct connectors, but not the whole interchange. And then you can go all the way from I-5 on every pretty much major freeway down to I-5 again along 405. So there are a lot of improvements that need to happen. Other important connections that are unfunded too. Direct access ramps, Northeast 2nd overpass with ramps in Bellevue. 195th direct access. Northeast 10th southbound off ramp. You name it, you name it. All of these are in the plan and were supposed to be put in place by 2020. If you go on the PSRC's website and look at it, no funding program for them. Completion year 2040, which could easily be 2050 or later. But these are important improvements that need to get done to, as Vic pointed out, those the 84% of people that are going to be traveling in cars in the year 2040. This needs to get done to make sure that both traffic and freight can move on 405 and 167 and also connect up to other freeways. So I just kind of highlighted a couple of key projects just to show the gravity of what we need to get done, what we know we need to get done to accommodate all of these trips. So for example, the 520 interchange now, there are stages to a lot of these. So first it's direct connectors. So directly connecting HOV to HOT or HOV to ETL. But then also there are bigger interchange projects. These are way bigger in scope in the master plan. And for example, this one is $1.3 billion just on the 520-405 interchange. The I-90 interchange is over $1 billion. And this needs to happen as well, and in 2 phases. So again, you have those direct connections, which WSDOT does have on their radar. They do have the direct connections, but they're also bigger, more accommodating to all vehicles in the future. And also finalizing and finishing the 167 interchange. As I mentioned before, the 167 interchange probably has I think it's $220 million worth of work being done to it right now, but the whole project is expected to cost $1.2 billion. And so these kind of projects I highlight, obviously probably the biggest that's not really being talked about that much is the additional lane that needs to be added. That cost is probably, over $1 billion at least, probably more than 2. But I just wanted to stress of what the needs are on 405 and how do we get there and figuring it out. And so that's kind of what I want to leave you with today, is that we have sort of changed. The original master plan did call for general purpose lanes, and the 2003 and 2005 gas tax increases backed that up. But we've sort of diverted a little bit from that record of decision in 2002 with the passage of that bill. According to the ramp and roadway reports, the tolling has not proven to move more vehicles per hour per lane than general purpose capacity. We're far behind on completing the master plan. We have no real funding plan to increase capacity here in the near future. And these vital projects need to be funded and completed to keep us barely keep us up with rising travel demand. So with that, I will hand it over.
Thanks, Walt, for that optimistic assessment of the 405. Our last presenter today is Todd Woosley, who is a long-serving board member of the ETA. He also serves on the City of Bellevue's Transportation Commission. Todd's extensive experience in the transportation policy arena includes being a board member of the I-90 Corridor Committee, one of only 6 executive board members of the original Transportation Partnership, past chair of the East King County Chambers of Commerce Legislative Coalition, and has provided professional representation of the area's largest residential and commercial real estate industry associations on transportation issues. Todd will conclude today's transportation issues briefing with a short segment on potential funding opportunities for critical transportation investments. Please welcome Todd Woosley.
Thank you, everybody. You've received a lot of information about effective transportation policies, challenges with the pilot tolling program, how people travel compared to how money is spent on transportation, and some key projects that Bob talked about that are in desperate need of enough funding to get them built as soon as possible. First, I want to let you all know that this information that you're being presented is not just pulled out of thin air. This is actually the information that's reported by our government in the required fashion. The ETA has just taken it, compiled it in a way that paints the big picture. It uses, the reporting from the transit agencies, from the State Department of Transportation. We're not challenging the credibility of those numbers, although there are some challenges with that. We're simply using theirs to help you understand, as candidates for the legislature, the situation that we're in. And as Vic showed, it's easily the #1 problem facing the people here. We appreciate everybody making the effort to drive 405, however you got here. Congratulations for leaving early enough, and thankfully there wasn't a big problem. But what I'm here to do is talk about how to help make this a possibility. It's about funding opportunities to finish this plan. Really, the answer is right under our nose. If we have an adopted plan, it would have tremendous benefits for us. And it's as simple as paying for it. It's kind of fun, too, because I received requests for funding for me to help for all of those either candidates. And now we're here today to ask you, as legislators, to send money our way as the driving public. Real simply put, there are 3 areas of funding opportunities that we all need to work on, both the public sector and the private sector, to successfully fund these solutions to our congestion problems. At the federal level, the federal administration is talking about $1 trillion infrastructure program, of which about $200 billion is designed for transportation. Roughly put, we're one of 50 states here in Washington, and our share of that would be about $4 billion. You could argue it should be more. But that would go a long way to helping fund some of these key projects. At the state level, we've used the gas tax, and it's been very successful. The state will likely be and continue to be the largest single funding source for our state highways and to help fund the roads, arterials that connect to them. The reports of the death of the gas tax are premature. The revenues are still coming in more. The forecasts are that it will continue to be the most robust revenue source. What's interesting about it is, yes, we do have the second highest gas tax in the country, but that's because we're one of the few states that doesn't use general fund revenues to fund our highway system. We have this dedicated funding source. What's also interesting is that given inflation, the gas tax increases have only kept us at pace with inflation and have not kept us at pace with the improvement in fuel economy that we've got. So we're actually paying less per mile in gas tax to drive than we have in the past. And we're getting what we pay for, which is horribly congested roads. And some of them now start to fall apart. We use these other sources as well. The ETA supports additional funding for the roads, but with the caveat that that has 18th Amendment protections. This issue where the drivers are paying so much more for the roads and are getting returned back and investing in the roads that we're paying for is really frustrating. So we support additional funding with money going into the motor vehicle fund and having the 18th Amendment protection that our state constitution requires that it be used for highway purposes. So we're with you on additional funding as long as it's going to go to solving the problem. We also have some regional options, and that's our third opportunity for funding. And it may be a combination of all of these that's necessary to accelerate the completion of the 405 master plan, which, by the way, is one of the policy priorities of the city of Bellevue and one of the legislative goals of the East Side Transportation Partnership. That's the coalition of all the cities on the East Side. Finishing the 405 master plan is the top priority. It's going to need the legislature to help get that done. Regionally, we have a couple options. Particularly, we have a regional transportation investment district. Some of you have heard about the RTIN. It's still on the books. It was designed to be a supplement for the gas tax because at the time it was put in, this region was only getting 80 cents back on every dollar we were paying in gas taxes. We also knew that the rest of the state really didn't need to have a gas tax increase high enough statewide to fund the critical problems here in the Puget Sound region. So the RTID, Regional Transportation Investment District, is designed to help fund the highway expansions here as well as arterials that connect to them. They almost passed in 2007, but that's still an opportunity we have available. We also have a transportation benefit district, which allows it to be done in various sizes, but that's a chance for local cities, the county, the region to, or some portions thereof, to come up with additional revenues to help pay for the critical road capacity that we're looking for. So again, the answer is really right in our budget. We already have a plan. We don't have to debate that. The plan is designed to solve the problems, to add a lot of capacity. It would benefit multiple modes of travel, whether it's on bus rapid transit, carpooling, or the vast majority of us being those single occupant vehicle drivers. So we encourage all of you as candidates and as elected officials to help come up with the funding necessary to finish that plan. We're not going to get it done in 2020, but we need to get it done as soon as we can. So there you have it. We support fair, effective, and equitable transportation policies and investments. We've shown you transit has received massive increases in funding while the state's roads have suffered from underinvestment. You are now aware of some mega projects that would move huge numbers of people and vehicles along the 405-167 corridor and reduce a lot of congestion, and learn about federal, state, and regional funding sources that would help pay for these and other critical transportation projects. You've been a great audience. We appreciate your time and patience here. We thank you for coming to learn about what we think is the largest issue facing the majority of your constituents. And now we're going to open it up for questions from our candidates for the legislature. Thank you very much.